All right, welcome everyone to our first How to Connect webinar. My name is Misty Wilson-Mehrtens. I am the department chair for the Behavioral and Social Sciences Department at TCC Connect, and I teach history. I am being joined today by Dr. Leah Tarwater.
Hello, I'm Dr. Leah Tarwater. I teach history here for TCC Connect.
In this series, we hope to explore how you can connect to your community and how you can make a difference in the world around you. At the end of this webinar, we are going to provide you a link so that you can get credit for attending. Look for that in the chat box when we're done. But for right now, we want you to be able to be prepared. So I'm going to flip it to a PowerPoint. And we're going to ask that you guys open a new browser tab or you get your phone out and that you go ahead and log into menti.com. We're going to have you use the code 572638. And as we go through this, we're going to have you answer some questions. Not questions, but questions. All right. This fall semester, we are going to be presenting a series on how to connect that is all about civic engagement. So upcoming, we're going to have a series about finding your political identity, about fake news, getting involved in the democratic system, and all of these are going to lead up to the 2018 midterm elections. We're going to have a walk the vote or an exercise the vote, and we hope you come out and join us for that. So this is going to lead us up to our first question today, which is, what is civics?
Well, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines civics as the study of the rights and duties of citizens and of how the government works. To go a little bit further, civic responsibility in higher education states that civic engagement means working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. A morally and civically responsible individual recognizes himself or herself as a member of a larger social fabric and therefore considers social problems to be at least partly his or her own. Such an individual is willing to see the moral and civic dimensions of issues, to make and justify informed moral and civic judgments, and to take action when appropriate. So, as you can see, the basic definition is that you understand your rights and duties as citizens and you understand how your government works. But it goes beyond just politics and the government to involvement in the government and the governing process or the electoral process, and then also serving your community.
So things like joining your school board could count. Things like volunteering for various organizations would count. Anything that you can do that helps enhance the community you live in and make it a better place. All of that counts under civic engagement. So this leads us to our second question, which is, why does this matter and how do we measure it?
So a couple of ways that we measure civic engagement, just through statistics. First is about 58% of eligible voters cast a ballot during presidential election years. So this is presidential election years. This is when people are the most involved in presidential elections. And so midterm elections, where you're not voting for presidents, you would see voter turnout as even less than that. So you're talking about in the largest years, only a little over half of eligible voters actually participate in the elections.
So voting, like we said before, is not the only way that we can measure this and how we can see if people are being involved or not. So these are just a couple of other measurements that have been taken by the Pew Online Research Organization, which is fairly reputable, that show us a level of engagement that we have in our society.
So 22% of people have attended a political meeting on local, town, or school affairs. 22% have recently signed a paper petition. And this is probably a higher number than in the past because 17% of those people completed those or signed those petitions online. 21% have recently contacted a government official about an issue that is important to them, with 18% of those doing so online. 13% have been an active member of a group that tries to influence the public or government, 10% have attended a political rally or speech, and 7% have worked or volunteered for a political party or candidate.
And one thing we should say about these numbers is they do overlap. So when we have 22 and 22%, you might be counting some of the same people there. That doesn't make 44%. So we can see this is kind of low as far as voter participation goes. As far as Western nations, we lag behind some other in these measurements. And again, it's hard to measure this exactly, but these are ways to get around that.
So it's difficult for us to measure something like civic engagement. These stats are one way that we can try to get at it, but there are other ways as well. So we want to try to gauge the civic engagement of those who are in this webinar today. We already asked y'all to log into menti.com, and so Misty's going to switch pages around for us, and we've got a few questions for you to answer on menti.com.
All right, so our first question is, we want to know, we elect a U.S. Senator for how many years?
Okay, so go into the screen. Sorry, y'all. What did I just do? Okay. So, on this question, 6 of you think that it was 6 years ago. Some of you think it was 4 years ago, or wait, 4 years for a term. And then some of you think it's 2 years. The correct answer is 6. A U.S. Senator serves a 6-year term. All right, moving on to the next question, hopefully. Right there.
All right, we want you guys to pick one of our current senators for the state of Texas. This is probably
Ooh, more participants this time. Good job, guys. Oh, yay. The majority of you know that one of our state's U.S. senators is Ted Cruz. Rick Perry was our previous governor, and Betsy Price is the mayor of Fort Worth.
All right, and then our last question for this section. If both the president and the vice president can no longer serve, who becomes president? All right, most of you guys got it.
Okay, so these questions you all just answered are actually part of the test given to immigrants who are applying for citizenship. One of the key aspects of this test is to demonstrate those becoming an American citizen have a grasp of civic knowledge. So we're going to switch back over to our PowerPoint, and we're going to share some more statistics with you.
All right, from a 2016 study, which we realize is just a little bit dated, but it's hard to get this information as up to date as we would like it to be. We know that 25% of Americans can name all 3 branches of government. So, Dr. Tarwater, they are
the legislative, executive, and judicial branches.
I read a study that said like 57% of Americans can name the 3 Kardashians.
Oh, that's so sad.
But only 25% of us can name the 3 branches of government.
And that is why we're doing this series.
About a third of Americans could not name any of the branches of government. And then roughly 60% of college graduates believe that Thomas Jefferson authored the Constitution. But as we all know, that was Abraham Lincoln, right?
Or maybe James Madison. Yeah, we'll go with Madison because that's the right answer.
So looking at these statistics, we can see that we are lacking a little bit of knowledge about engagement, about our system, about how to kind of know what's going on and be involved. We wanted to take a minute to look back at what our founders said about being involved and what they thought we should be doing.
So now we're at the third part of this webinar, which is really probably the most important part today. Our political history, our founding documents, and our Constitution don't just give us the right to participate in the system. In actuality, to participate is a responsibility that all citizens should take seriously. So we want to walk through some of these important documents and moments with you today so that you know how citizens obtained these rights and how the right to participate has expanded from our founding to now.
So starting at the beginning, 1776, and looking at what our founders said, we need to keep in mind that this idea of citizenship was fairly new to them. Before this point, people thought of themselves not as citizens, but as subjects. So as you're reading these quotes with us, pay attention to that aspect of it.
So James Madison said, "Learned institutions ought to be favorite objects with every people. They throw that light over the public mind, which is the best security against crafty and dangerous encroachments on the public liberty." So in 2018 speak, what James Madison is saying is that education is important, right, for every free people, and we are free people, because it enlightens us. It educates us on what's going on in the world around us, in our government. So if we are informed, the informed public mind is the best security, because we can know how our government works, and then we can watch what our government is doing, and by doing that, we can hold them accountable, and that is how we protect our public liberty.
All right, we have 2 quotes by Thomas Jefferson here, and we just couldn't pick between the 2. So, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Basically, Jefferson is echoing some of the ideas here that you just heard, that to have freedom, you have to have education, you have to be informed, and ignorant people cannot be a free people, essentially is what he's saying.
And he also says, we in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. So even if a majority of people supported one candidate, but didn't all vote, right? That means that person might not get elected. It's based upon the majority of people who participate. So you might get on Facebook and complain a lot, or any social media outlet, and talk about this stuff. But if you're not actually participating by supporting the candidate, campaigning for them, voting, then you're really not part of the majority who governs.
You're letting the 58% of us who vote decide for you.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to try something a little different because the Minty thing is not working out great. In the chat box, we want you guys to type which of the quotes you think best sums up, which one speaks to you the most. Do you have more of a fondness for what Madison said or for what Jefferson said? And if you pick Jefferson, tell us if it's the first Jefferson quote or the second Jefferson quote that you like the best. And we'll let you guys type that as we keep going.
Okay, so we know that the founders want us to be involved, but they had to move from just wanting that to ensuring it in a governmental system. when Madison sits down to write the Constitution, this is on his mind. So what are the first words of the Constitution? We the people, and thank y'all for participating in the chat box. We the people, in fact, this is the beginning of the Constitution. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So he's saying that it is we, the people, who are establishing this government to ensure domestic tranquility, to establish justice, right? To protect our common defense and the blessings of liberty. So right there at the very beginning of the Constitution, you know what the founders were thinking about, and it is we, the people.
So we see that the founders are creating this form of government. They're putting power in the hands of the people. They say that to be successful, we have to have an educated citizenry. But none of this really makes sense unless you have the historical context of the moment. So Dr. Tarwater, can you put this in a context for us of the American Revolution?
So this is really different. What the founders are proposing, what they're putting in the Constitution, is really different from anything else that the world has seen prior to the American Revolution. The Revolution led to the creation of the first government in the entire world, which gave the ultimate power to the people rather than a king or some other ruling class. In fact, instead of the people's rights being given to them by a monarch, it is the people who give the government the right to govern them. There are no subjects in the United States, but instead citizens who are subject only to laws that they are laws that are created by them indirectly through those they have elected to represent them. And I don't think that that's really something that people put a lot of thought into. You do indirectly write the laws in this country, and that's because you choose the people who go to DC and represent you and make those laws on your behalf. And because of that, it's really important that we not only know who we're electing, but also that we see that we pay attention to the types of laws that they are passing on our behalf. Now, moving on to the rest of the document, Madison outlines the basic responsibilities of each branch. So we're just going to briefly run through them here, just so you have a basic understanding. If you've already had your U.S. government class, then this will just be a review for you. So starting out with the legislative branch. The legislative branch has legislative powers or the powers to make laws. Specific powers granted to this branch are the power to tax internally and externally. They can regulate foreign and interstate commerce. They can declare war, raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, make treaties, and make all laws, quote unquote, this is out of the Constitution, necessary and proper to carry out the powers given to them by the Constitution. The next branch is the executive branch. And here the founders created the very first American national executive, which of course is the President of the United States. And the president is elected indirectly by an electoral college. And this was created to be a shield against direct democracy and the domination of large population centers. We'll explore this later in our webinar series when we focus on the electoral college. The president will serve 4-year terms. And he has, of course, I say he because we haven't had a she yet. So presidents have the authority to appoint executive officials and federal judges with Senate approval. He's the leading architect of U.S. foreign policy and serves as the commander-in-chief of military forces. The president also signs acts of Congress into law, but he also has the authority to veto these congressional bills as a check provided by the Constitution. But Congress can override his veto with a 2/3 vote. And then the last branch is the judicial branch. This also created the very first national judiciary. Before this, the court system was controlled by each state. Each state had their own judiciary branch. But now under the Constitution, they created a national one where federal judges have jurisdiction over federal and interstate legal disputes. And they serve lifetime terms on the condition of good behavior, which means they can be impeached for things. And the federal courts also hear cases that have been appealed, and they can ultimately make it up to the Supreme Court, which is the ultimate appellate court.
All right, so that's the structure of the Constitution. So from the time the Constitution has gone into effect until now, we've obviously expanded the rights that we have. We started the process of expanding almost immediately with the Bill of Rights. That's the first 10 amendments that were passed to the Constitution, passed pretty much immediately after ratification. We've continued to expand through the 20th century. And I'm saying 20th century there because we haven't adjusted any amendments since the 20th century. So we want to highlight for you the most important amendments, and particularly these are the ones that concern your right to participate in political and civil society. And don't worry, we're not going to read them to you.
But you can read them yourself up on the screen. So the First Amendment protects your, freedom of religion and press and speech. And the important thing, first of all, to say about the Bill of Rights is that these are not rights that are given to you by the government. Our founders believed that these are rights that you have because they were given to you, as Jefferson said in the Declaration, by our Creator. So that just simply means you have them because you are a human being. And so what the founders put in the Bill of Rights were rights that they felt like the government was responsible for protecting, but not necessarily rights that were granted by the government. And in this is the First Amendment, and what is protected here is your ability to vocally disagree with the government. So they wanted you to be able to say your opinion, whether or not it was popular and whether or not it was complimentary to the government or governing officials. So the First Amendment protects that right.
All right, so we're going to jump ahead quite a bit of time to the 13th Amendment. So this is passed in the Civil War era, right at the end of it when the North is winning. And this is going to outlaw the condition of slavery. So that right there is a huge moment because we no longer have this slave class. Now we're moving towards an egalitarian system. It leads directly to
the 14th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment gives citizenship to these freed slaves. So before, they're pretty much viewed as property. Then they obtain freedom, but they're still not citizens because they're not white. But now, once the 14th Amendment is ratified, these freed men become citizens of the United States, which leads us to
the 15th Amendment. And just to add one thing to the 14th Amendment, it does give us birthright citizenship. So you don't have to serve in the military. You don't have to pay a certain tax. If you're born here, you're a citizen, which again leads us right to the 15th Amendment, which is going to give voting rights to those freed slaves. Now, this is a very, very, very specific amendment. It's really after the Civil War era that this is going to go into effect. Pretty much immediately, we're going to start seeing states pass laws in the Jim Crow South that try to chip away at this. So while the constitutional right is there, it doesn't mean the ability is always there. All right, now we're going to jump way ahead.
Yeah, so while in the late 1860s, African-American males get the right to vote, women still can't. And it's not until the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1919, and then it goes into effect in 1920, when women actually get the right to vote. So now male and females of any race in America can vote. And I should add that there were some states where women could vote previous to the 19th Amendment, but this makes sure that nationally all women have the right to vote.
Right, because they could vote in state elections,
yes,
but not federal elections in those very few states. All right, so the 14th Amendment is the next time that we are going to really expand our voting rights. And this one, again, is going to come in the Civil Rights era, and it's going to knock out that poll tax. So it's removing barriers from voting. At this point, hopefully, we're trying to get towards any person can vote, and you don't have to pay for it. You're not going to be denied the right to vote because you can't afford it.
And then we have the 26th Amendment. Previous to the 26th Amendment, you had to be 21 years old to vote. And there's going to be a push to change this during the Vietnam War because, the concern was we can ship men off to war to die for our country at the age of 18, but they can't vote. So you can die for your country, but you can't vote yet. And so because of that, there was a push to lower the voting age, which was ratified, or which came about in the 26th Amendment. And this is going to give all citizens of the United States who are 18 or older the right to vote.
All right, now the last two things we want to touch on here as far as expanding rights are not amendments, but they are very, very important acts of Congress. So we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, both signed by which president?
Lyndon Johnson.
Which, if you've taken my class, you know I love talking about him.
And the rest of us don't know why.
So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is going to say that you will not be barred from voting based on race, color, ethnicity, or gender. We're really checking all the boxes there so that nobody in the Jim Crow South can kind of get around it. The Voting Rights Act is going to follow that up and provide real structure to the voting system and also some teeth to it. So if states are found to be violating it, they can be held accountable for that. So with these two acts and with these amendments, we've now arrived at a point where virtually all Americans of legal age can vote. You can speak up for what you believe and you can work to make your community a better place. But having the right to vote doesn't really matter if you don't exercise it. Going back to that idea of 58% of us, right? So having the right to participate is simply not enough. We want to share with you some of our famous calls to action. These are by our favorite and sometimes some least favorite people in history, just so that we hope you are inspired by what they say to get involved and to get motivated.
So starting with John F. Kennedy, obviously president in the early 1960s, one of his most famous quotes is this: "And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man." And so this really is a call to action. It's not, what great things can your country give to you, but how can we make this a better place? How can we get involved? And how civically can we engage and make this a better place?
So the president following him directly is going to be Lyndon B. Johnson. And I personally love this quote, but I do understand that it's slightly dramatic.
Slightly.
These are the stakes: to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the darkness. We must either love each other or we must die. This was from a political ad called the Daisy ad. It only aired one time. It's the only time it was allowed to be aired. If you haven't watched it, get on YouTube, find the Daisy ad. It'll definitely blow your mind. It's a different kind of political ad. But the words there are very important. He's saying, in the civil rights movement, in the women's rights movement, in the American Indian movement, in this time of a lot of cultural and social change in the United States, the 1960s, we have to find a way to work together. We have to find some unity here. We have to band together, because if we can't live together, we're going to die alone. So a tad bit dramatic, but words to live by. Oh, you got a long one.
I'm just, I was about to say something about LBJ, but I'm just going to move right along. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Reagan. And yeah, this is a little bit longer, but it's good stuff anyways. So Reagan says, "In this land occurred the only true revolution in man's history. All other revolutions simply exchanged one set of rulers for another. Here, for the first time, the founding fathers, that little band of men, so advanced beyond their time that the world has never seen their like since, evolved the idea that you and I have the God-given right and ability within ourselves to determine our own destiny. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free." And there's really so much truth behind this, because if we all just sit on our hands and do nothing and we're not involved, freedom it's not just going to be there forever. It's something that we have to fight for daily as American citizens. And I think some people take this to mean fight in the military, but that's not just what he's talking about. He's also talking about being involved, knowing what your government's doing, knowing who's running for your running your government, being involved in the community around you, ensuring that the freedom and the liberties that we enjoy are something that we're able to pass down to the next generation. But the responsibility that also comes with that is teaching the next generation about these same things, not just expecting that they're going to just automatically know it.
So I'm getting all the Texas presidents here, but George W. Bush said, "Ignorance of American history and civics weakens our sense of citizenship. To be an American is not just a matter of blood or birth," kind of echoing what Reagan said there. "We are bound by ideals, and our children must know these ideals." He was saying this when he was signing into law a new civics education movement for high school students and for early elementary students. Some states adopted it, some states did not. But this is a really important sense of we gain so much more history and knowing what our ideals are, and that binds us together as Americans.
And then we have a quote from President Barack Obama, who said, "You and I, as citizens, have the power to set this country's course. You and I, as citizens, have the obligation to shape the debates of our time, not only with the votes we cast, but with the voices we lift in defense of our most ancient values and enduring ideals." So he's saying we really do have an incredible power in this country to direct the path of it. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand today. You hear, it's just one vote, it's just one voice, it really doesn't matter. But if everybody says that and believes that, well, then there's no voices to be heard. So you have to get involved to shape the debates. And he says, not just casting your votes. Yes, that's one step and it is important, but it's not the only one. We also have to speak out and we also have to get involved in other ways.
All right, and then our last quote here is from the late John McCain. John McCain recently passed. If you haven't been watching the news coverage of it, I highly recommend that you do so. There's been some really interesting articles written. A lot of great perspectives on his time, both in Vietnam and his time in the Senate, have been coming out. "Civic participation over a lifetime, working in neighborhoods and communities, and service of all kinds, military and civilian, full-time and part-time, national and international, will strengthen America's civic purpose." This quote really exemplifies the life that John McCain lived, in my opinion. I mean, his life was all about service to the United States in various forms or fashion. So we gave you guys a bunch of our favorite calls to action. And again, because our Minty thing didn't really work out the way we were hoping it would, I think there's too much of a time lag here. We're going to ask you guys once again to tell us which of the quotes in the chat box you find resonates the most with you. Is it the Kennedy, the Johnson, the Reagan, the Bush, Obama, or McCain quote that speaks the most to you about civic engagement? And then we want to close today with our own call to action to you.
So get involved, y'all. We stress politics because, well, we both study American history. And so we're very much about knowing how your government operates, knowing who runs your government, paying attention to the people who are running for office, not just nationally and not just at the state level, but also at the local level, and voting in those elections. Campaigning for those people, contacting your officials, but also find somewhere to volunteer. Just do whatever you can to make your community a better place. But speaking of voting, if you are 18 or older and a U.S. citizen, then you can vote in these elections. The deadline to register to vote in Texas, if you are not registered, is October 9th. And ways to register to vote. You can find voters registration cards at the post office. There will probably be some get out the vote booths set up on campuses that will have voter registration cards, and you can fill them out and you will have to mail it in, or you can go to votetexas.gov and you can find a voter registration form there that you can fill out. You will still have to print it out and mail it in. But again, it has to be postmarked by October 9th to be able to vote in November's election.
So once you get registered, that's not enough. You can't just get registered. You actually have to go vote. That's the important next step. That's how you get to be in that 58% of us. You don't just have to register. So we want to remind you guys of the dates that you can go vote. The early voting is from October 22nd to November 2nd. It's, for me, the best time to go vote. The lines are shorter.
Oh, I'm all about early voting.
You get in and out. It's much, much, much more convenient.
Yes.
If you would like to, the TCC Connect campus faculty are going to do a walk the vote. We're going to exercise and then exercise our right to vote on November 2nd and November 1st. That's a Thursday and a Friday. We'll have more information on the times coming soon, so check back with us. And then actual election day, your last opportunity to vote, is going to be on November 6th. That's the first Tuesday in November.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you guys for joining us for our first How to Connect web series. We are so excited to be doing this.
And thank you for bearing with us through the hiccups along the way today.
We promise we'll get better with YouTube Live.
But we're excited about this series that we're doing this semester, so we hope you'll tune into as many of them as you can. And don't forget that even if you're not able to tune in live, that you can watch the recordings. YouTube will have the recordings uploaded on our channel within 24 hours of the end of the live broadcast. So you can get back in and watch the videos even if you can't tune in live. So make sure that you do that. And also, if you are a student at TCC and your instructor has offered you credit or extra credit for attending this, you will want to fill out the Google Doc that is on the screen, and the link was just posted in the chat box. So in the next 30 minutes, you'll want to go to this Google Doc, fill it out, and submit it. And then we'll get your instructors the information that you have attended. If you're watching it, if you're watching the recorded edition of it rather than live, then you'll want to talk to your instructor about how else you can receive credit for that. So we hope that you'll tune into our future webinars throughout the semester and then go vote with us in November.
All right, thank you guys.